All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through the online PDF book, AppInventor2, Create Your Own Android Apps by Wolberg, Abelson, Spertus, and Looney. We're in the middle of Chapter 8, the President's Quiz, and I did have to reboot the machine, had myself some lunch, and now I'm back. So as you can see here, which president, so it has the question in there, and it currently has the correct image too. All right, and our hint is in there, enter an answer. We can enter it right here, or we can click done and then just manually put it in too. All right, so I can put in here Roosevelt, but when I click submit right now, nothing happens because there's nothing programmed for it. When I click next, nothing happens because there's nothing programmed for it. So this is where we have to head out toward. So, as it says, now program the behavior of the next button. You've already defined the current question index to remember the current question. When the user clicks the next button, it needs to increment from 1 to 2 to 3, and then when it gets to 3, eventually we're going to want it to go back to 1. All right, so this is what we want to do. So it's our next button dot click. So let's go back to our designer. We're in the designer. Let's go back to the blocks editor, and let's take some of these that we have here and let's collapse them so we've got a little bit more room to work with. All right, so we want to program our next button right there. And it says here we want to set the current question index to get current question index plus 1. So in other words, again, we want it to increment. And this was our current question index. So we want to set that equal to, and we're going to want to put a math operation in here because we're going to want to add, and we want the get current question index plus, and we want a 1. This is going to allow us to increment to the next question. All right, that's the first thing we want to do. Then we want to set the question label.text, so we want it to select the right one from our list. Okay, so this is set question label.text. Oops, sorry. So again, we want to set our question label.text, and we want to do a select list item and we want the list to be our get questions list and our index to be get current questions index. Get question list and get current question index. Okay? All right. And then they explain this. It says the first row of blocks increments the variable current question index. Again, if it has a 3 in it, I'm sorry, 1 in it, it's changed to a 2. If it has a 3 in it, 2 in it, it's changed to a 3. All right? So we should be able to now click our next button and iterate our way through here. So let's check. All right. There's our second question. There's our third question. And you'll notice it does not come back. In fact, we're getting an error there. Okay? That's okay, because we're going to fix that in just a minute. says the problem with the code thus far is that it simply increments. All right, when you get from 3 and you go to 4, there are not 4 items, so it displays the error and it forces the app to quit. And it says, how can we make sure that doesn't happen? Well, it says the app needs to ask a question when the next button is clicked and do differently based on the answer. So in other words, if the index is less than or equal to 2, it needs to increment. But if it's 3, it needs to set it back to 1. So we want to put an if block in there that checks to see whether or not the current test index or index is greater than or equal to 3. And if it is, we're going to want to set it back to 1. So this is it right here. Now we've got our next button, but we're going to have to make some changes to it. All right, and again, getting a little bit technical here. So I'm going to do this. Knock that down, there we go. All right, and we're going to come back here. And as mentioned, okay, there's our next button. So we want to set that. That's correct. But where we've got this set here, before we do this, we want to put an if statement in there. Let's get to control. Let's put an if statement, and let's put it. So that's got to be put into our set. Want an if then else. Want a simple if then. Right there. Okay, so I want to put those in between. All right. And then if the get current question index is greater than 3, so for in this, we want to come down to our math, and this is what we want, but we're going to want a greater than in here. So if our get global current index, if it's greater than 3, and remember, we can always come in here and click here, type in a 3, and hit enter, and there it puts that right there, so we can now put that in. All right, so if that's the case, then we want to set the current index back to 1. I'm not even going to duplicate. I'm just going to come back in here. Don't know what I did there, but let's just copy this. We'll duplicate this, put it right there. Now let's see if we're able to iterate our way through. So when we get to question 3, do we pop back to question 1 again? All right. It already did. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and we're back to 1. All right, things are going well. And let's collapse this, and let's collapse this. We may need to open one or more of them up like you've just seen, but that's not a problem. All right, and that's the explanation that I just gave you. All right. It says if your blocks for the next button work, pat yourself on the back. You're on your way to becoming a programmer. But what if you added a new question and answer to the quiz? Would it still work? And the answer is technically no. So they want you to add a 4th question, all right, as shown there. So we want to add which president was in office when 2 atom bombs were dropped on Japan, and that's Truman. So let's go back to where we had this here. Which president was in office when 2 atom bombs were dropped on Japan? Okay, So we want to come back into our question and answer lists. All right, so we'll want to come in here and add yet another one. So we want to add another item. So right there, we want to add a text box. And we want that to be which president was in office, etc., etc. And we're going to take, this, and we're going to expand that. And again, we're going to come in just like we just did. I'm going to click here, add another item, click text, put this in, and that became Truman. All right. So now we have 4 questions and 4 answers, but let's see how our program reacts to that. All right, we're on question 1, then 2, then 3, then back to 1. So we've skipped 4. So we technically have not coded this correctly. As it says, the issue here is that the test to determine whether the user on the last question is too specific. What we want to do is we want to worry about the current question index, but not the value with it. As it says, such dependencies in a computer program often lead to bugs, especially as the app grows in complexity. A much better strategy is to design the blocks so they will work no matter how many questions you have. So instead of asking the value of the current question index is greater than 3, all right, ask if it's greater than the number of items in the question list. All right, so we're going to want a length of list to find out how many items are in it, and then a get global question list. So as it says, the if test now compares the current question index to the length of the question list. All right, so if the current question is 5 and the length of the list is 4, then you know you've got to set it back to 1. All right, if it was reversed, if the current question index was 4 and the length was 5, you could increment and go up 1 more. All right, so let's take this and we'll bring this up. And I think I'm going to do exactly what I just did a second ago, and that is I'm going to do a print screen here. Bring that back. Come into here. All right, we should now be able to collapse this and collapse this, and we want our next button. All right, so set global to global plus 1. If now we don't want to say greater than 3, we want to say if it's greater than we want this to be a length in here. So we want that to be the length of a list, and in particular the list we want it to be is the get global question list. Right there. Then set it to 1. I think that is everything. Now, real quick check to see whether or not we did this correctly. Okay, we're just about done with this segment. Is to come back into here, and now we're at question 1, 2, 3. Now we see question 4. Oh, we still didn't. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we're still not seeing it. Now, it could be that the thing just hasn't updated, so we're going to do that. I'm going to go back and I'm going to reset the connection. and I will come back to continue on with this. We're making good headway in here. We're on page 12 of 20. All right, and we'll go back and start switching the image in just a couple minutes.